that sweet, innocent world of our younger years was more fragile than we knew. As Hitler's mad ambition plunged Europe into war, we Americans watched from an ocean away, hoping it was a conflict we somehow could keep out of. In the end, the decision wasn't ours. It was made for us on December 7th, 1941. Norman Justice was a young deliveryman for a delicatessen on Troost.
And I was on my way there and heard the radio on this Troost streetcar, and they said that the United States was at war because the Japs had bombed Pearl Harbor. And never dreamed on that streetcar that within the next year, 2 years or 3 years, I would be there exactly in that spot.
In the war, I had my brother Nick, my brother Leonard, and Alfred.
My brother Lyman was in the Marine Corps. I remember being anxious because he was at Iwo Jima.
I went into the Navy. I didn't like the Army because you had to sleep on the ground, so I joined the Navy.
I sailed away on the U.S. President Monroe, and I looked at her and said, never again will I walk up and down Strawberry Hill, I figured I'd never come back,
On the home front, our city carried its share of the war effort, supporting our service people in the field. B-25s, the workhorse of the American bomber fleet, rolled off the line at Fairfax, an assembly line converted from making cars to building planes. With manpower short, women left the home to take their place in the factory. And in a curious way, the war may have had a leveling effect.
People made a lot of sacrifices. There was gasoline rationing, sugar rationing, meat rationing, and also people traveled by public transportation as a matter of necessity, so that the difference between the wealthiest person and the poorest person in the community was really not that great when it came to immediate consumerism.
It was a desperate and costly struggle, both in Europe and the Pacific. The end came suddenly.
After almost 3 years, I got leave to come home, So I bought a newspaper, and it gave the story of the dropping of the first atomic bomb, It wasn't a big story because they didn't know, how bad it was. I thought to myself, a few more like that, I won't have to come back,
In fact, it only took one more to induce a Japanese surrender. Nuclear weapons and President Truman's decision to use them had changed the possibilities of war forever. But such speculations were lost in the euphoria of the Allies' victory.
This whole street from Venice Avenue down to 5th Street, it was blocked. Dancing in the streets and everything. When they went into service, we all cried. When they come back, we had a hell of a good time.
The war had given renewed force to a powerful ideal. Those who had fought to defend the ideals of freedom and opportunity wanted their full measure of both. But hardly had the man-made tragedy of war been put behind before our town was called to face a catastrophe of another kind. In the summer of 1951, on that darkest of Fridays, July 13, the rain-swollen Kaw and Missouri rivers overflowed their banks, breached the levees, and swept property and dreams away. I was a lifeguard that summer at a pool on the bluff overlooking the Central Industrial District, and had a ringside seat as the drama unfolded below.
You could see the water coming. It looked just like a humongous wall. It's something that, I'll never forget.
I seen it coming in, and you could see, I had some binoculars, and looking down Kansas Avenue, and everything was rolling in. Lumber, refrigerators, stoves, cars, everything, even a horse.
At 4 o'clock in the morning, they came and knocked on the doors and they made everybody get up. So we landed up at Penn Valley Park. And I had a little pig made of clay. And I carried my pig everywhere I had money in it.
It was days before the water went down and the cleanup could begin. Those who returned, like Mary Reyes, found wholesale devastation.
Our house was facing west, and when we went to look for it, it was on the other people's yard facing south. The only thing that I found was a crucifix, which I still have.
If the war had changed attitudes, the flood changed demographics in a sudden and lasting way.
Well, you get a little rock or a rock and throw it in a puddle of water, and you see how it splashes. Well, that's the way the Hispanic community of Armadale went.
It was around that same time, I think, that we began to understand, reluctantly and much too late, the hurts that we who share this country, this city, had inflicted on one another.
When I first came to Kansas City, the blacks wasn't across 27th Street, and they just had them in a little area that, and it was hard to get an apartment. You just couldn't hardly find an apartment.
I remember one time I went to the American Raw. When we got ready to go in, the guy looked at the tickets, which were right down on the front row, and told us we couldn't sit there. We had to go up to the top. My dad just left the tickets with him and told him, "You keep them in."
This young lady brought me the food in a sack. I said, "Oh," I said, this isn't to go. I said, I'm going to eat here. He says, "Oh, you can't eat here."
They'd say, "I'm sorry, but we don't serve Mexicans."
One of the things that I remember was the cold looks that people would give you. You know, it was as though their rite of passage preceded yours.
This particular lady, I got on the bus, and she just got up and went to the back of the bus. And I guess because I was black, she felt uncomfortable. So I just let her have it. I told her I was going to ride this bus every day. And if I see her, and if it wasn't a seat, I was going to sit in her lap.
People dealt with those hurts in the best way they could, with pride, with tears, or by trying to look ahead.
Some guy made a nasty remark about Italians. I'm sitting on the curb crying, you know. This Greek fella come out there. He says, "Listen, Joe, you get every nationality to bake a loaf of bread, and you haven't cut it, you're going to find crumbs in all of it."
Our parents would always talk to us, and they always told us that everybody wasn't mean and bad, and that we should know that.
I think immediately of Max Breton, an unsung hero, or maybe a sung hero. The only restaurant in the city that was open to everybody.
Breton's restaurant on Baltimore was famous not only for its fine cuisine, but also for the warmth and wisdom of the host, who'd been a rabbi before he was a restaurateur. People of different races met there regularly to break bread and build bridges.
There was a very good customer who looked at my father and said, "You know, Max, if you continue to let them in, I won't come back." And my father was a very gentle man, and he looked at him and he simply said, "I'm sorry, we'll miss you."
The civil rights movement of the 1960s brought heightened awareness and grudging change. But with the assassination of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis in 1968, the ugly wounds were laid open for all to see. The fires of riot that erupted in many cities across the country burst out here as well.
I can remember the fear. As an African American, you really didn't feel you had any protection, for sure. You know, you really couldn't be certain that anyone would really protect you. I think it was one of the darkest times in our city.
That darkest of times may be behind us, but in many ways the hurts and the divisions that provoked it still are with us. Moreover, we're caught now, all of us, in a curious conflict, reaching for a better, more equitable future without forgetting the best of our past. Italian Americans play the game their fathers and grandfathers played on the grass of the old country. Men who grew up in the North End still gather to remember at the restaurant Jenny Borelli founded, where her grandson, Tom Borelli, now presides. Ed Goldsich goes back weekly to his old Strawberry Hill neighborhood to volunteer his medical services at a clinic for the poor. The Feast of Hanukkah evokes for Jews a powerful sense of kinship, in the memory of their long history in many lands. The Irish celebrate Irishness with their ancient order of Hibernians and their St. Patrick's Day parades. Mexican Americans recall their native country's struggle for independence with the music and gaiety of their Cinco de Mayo fiesta. And Black History Month draws attention to African Americans' abundant contributions to our country. Can the deep wounds finally then be healed?
Oh, I'm an optimist, and I think that I have to believe that we have a shot at it.
I've always thought if you work at it and don't wallow in the luxury of despair, like our Jesuit instructors used to tell us, it'll come.
And you can never communicate with anybody unless you talk to him. And you might have to invade his space to talk to him. You might have to shake his hand. You might have to put your arm around him. You might have to hug him, you know.
People are people. That's the reason. That's what makes our country great, is the fact we may look different, we may eat different foods, we may dress different, but we're all still the same people. And that's what makes America.
We'll never again hear the hucksters cry along our streets, or pass our summer nights sleeping on blankets in the park. In many ways, time's passage has made unrecognizable the city of our collective memories, the one we used to know. And later waves of people have joined us, from Asia, from the Middle East, from the shattered Soviet Empire, bringing their gifts, adding their richness to the mix. Our challenge now, our opportunity, is to find the way to share together, to share more fully, this place we've built together and still are building. This place that all of us call home.
I think it's a wonderful town.
Kansas City. Let me just tell you, Kansas City, the greatest place in the world to live.
I've seen a lot of people leave, and I've seen a lot of those people come back.
I've been in big cities, but I just think Kansas City is marvelous.
It's a nice, heartwarming place.
I've seen this town grow from nothing.
It's been a wonderful community to me and to my family.
I'll live here until they run me out or until I die.
Unhappy times, forget them. I'd rather have you just remember good happy times.
It's home. It's all right with me.
my dad was a great believer and lover of birds. We used to go down to Cliff Drive, and he'd carry me when I was a young boy, and we'd go down and see all the wild canaries and the cardinals and such. But at one time, he raised 300 canaries. So one day, a little lady came in, and she's carrying packages, and she lived up the street, and I'd see her, and I was a young boy, maybe 7, 8 years old. And she asked my dad if he would sell her a pair of canaries. So we put them in this little wooden cage, charged her 50 cents, I think, at the time. No one had money. And she took them. As she's going out the door, I said, "Are you going to start raising canaries?" She said, "No. My son's in jail, and he would like to have a pair of canaries." So I said, "Oh, her son was Robert Stroud. He's the Birdman of Alcatraz, and if you understand, he became the foremost authority on canaries, and they were my father's canaries that he started with." If you go out to our new zoo, the marvelous, marvelous Kansas City Zoo, if you go in the aviary, you'll see a little sign that says, "The birds of this aviary in memory of Jack DiCapo by his family and friends." Now, that's America.
Production costs for this place called home have been paid for in part by Sprint, committed to the community, connecting you to the world.